The war dragon screamed, and the sound shook the walls of the containment hangar. Commander Sun watched through the observation window as another elite soldier flew through the air and crashed against the metal floor. The soldier did not move. Medical teams rushed in with stretchers while the massive creature roared its hatred at everyone who dared to come close. Was his name. He was the last of his kind, a living weapon from the old wars. 600 meters of armored scales and burning eyes. His body was built for destruction. Plasma cannons grew from his spine like natural bones. His claws could tear through starship hulls. His wings, when spread, could block out the light of a sun. The ancient engineers who created the war dragons had made them to be the ultimate force in the galaxy. But a war dragon without a rider was just a wild beast, and had not accepted a rider in 30 years. Sun turned away from the window and looked at the reports on his desk. 72 warriors had tried to bond with 12 different species. The strongest, fastest, bravest soldiers the Galactic Coalition could find. 23 of them were now dead. The rest carried permanent injuries, broken spines, missing limbs, shattered minds. The war dragon did not want to be ridden. He made this very clear to anyone who tried. "Sir," said a young officer, stepping into the observation room, "the council is asking for another update." "Tell them the same thing I told them last week," Sun said, his voice tired. "The beast cannot be controlled. We should consider termination." But even as he said the words, he knew the council would refuse. The Hollow Empire was coming. Their fortress ships had already destroyed 3 colony worlds. The Coalition's regular fleet could not stop them. Only a war dragon had the power to break through their defenses, and was the only war dragon left alive. So they kept trying, and kept killing. Sun looked back at the creature through the window. Had settled now, his massive body curled in the far corner of the hangar. His scales were not smooth like they should be. They were covered in scars, old burns from plasma weapons, long cuts from vibration blades, rough patches where flesh had been torn and healed badly. His neck and underbelly showed the worst damage, deep circular wounds that had never fully closed. Control spike marks. Sun knew what they were. In the old days, some riders had used pain to force their dragons into obedience. Metal spikes driven into sensitive flesh, connected to neural controllers that delivered agony at the push of a button. His first rider had been one of those cruel masters. And when that rider died in battle 30 years ago, the dragon had decided that no one would ever hurt him again. Sun understood the creature's rage. He even respected it. But understanding did not solve his problem. The Hollow Empire would reach coalition space in 3 months. Without, millions would die. Far away, on a small blue planet called Earth, a young woman named was finishing her work for the day. She cleaned the last medical tools and put them back in their proper places. The animal shelter where she worked was quiet now. Most of the creatures were sleeping. Was not a special person by most standards. She was 24 years old, small and thin, with a soft voice that sometimes people had trouble hearing. She had no military training. She had never left Earth. She spent her days caring for broken animals, dogs that had been beaten by bad owners, cats that feared human hands, seals that washed up on the beach with injuries from fishing nets. She was good at her job, not because she was smart or strong, but because she was patient. She could sit with a frightened animal for hours, for days, for weeks, asking nothing, demanding nothing, just being present until the creature decided on its own that she was safe. That night found a strange message in her communication device. It came from something called the Galactic Coalition. She had heard of them on the news broadcasts. The alliance of alien species that humanity had joined 20 years ago. The message said they were looking for humans with experience in trauma-informed animal care. Almost deleted it. She was nobody. What could the galaxy possibly want with her? But attached to the message was an image. A creature she had never seen before, massive and terrifying, covered in scars. Its eyes burned like stars, but behind the fire saw something she recognized. She had seen that look in the eyes of abused dogs, in the eyes of wounded seals, in the eyes of every broken creature she had ever helped. Pain, old, deep, endless pain. And underneath it, hidden so well that most people would never see it, fear. Looked at the image for a long time. She thought about her small life, her quiet shelter, her gentle routines. She thought about the animals she had healed and the ones she had lost. She thought about what it meant to approach something that could kill you with a single movement. Then she sent her reply. 3 weeks later, she stepped off a transport ship onto Coalition Station Meridian, carrying nothing but a small bag of personal items and a heart full of uncertain hope. Around her, alien warriors towered like giants, their eyes passing over her as if she did not exist. She was not what they expected. She was not what anyone expected. But somewhere in the depths of the station, a broken dragon waited, and had learned long ago that the most wounded creatures often needed the most unlikely healers. The warriors laughed when they saw her, stood in the briefing room, surrounded by soldiers twice her size, and listened to their whispers. They spoke in languages she did not understand, but their meaning was clear from their faces. This small human girl, this was the Coalition's new hope. Lieutenant, the human military officer assigned to guide her, looked embarrassed. He was a tall man with a serious face and the body of someone who had spent his life in combat. Standing next to, he seemed like a completely different species. "I apologize for them," he said quietly. "They do not mean to be cruel. They simply do not understand why you are here." "I do not understand either," admitted. Her voice was soft as always. "I heal sick animals. I am not a warrior." "That is exactly why the Xenobiology department requested you," said. 72 warriors have failed. Perhaps what needs is not another fighter. He led her through the station's long corridors. The walls were metal and cold. The lights hummed with a sound that made uncomfortable. Everything here was hard and sharp, built for war rather than comfort. She missed the wooden floors of her shelter, the smell of the sea through open windows. Finally, they reached a massive door marked with warning symbols in a dozen languages. Pressed his hand to a scanner, and the door slid open. The hangar beyond was the largest space had ever seen. It could have held her entire town inside it, and in the center, curled like a mountain of scales and fury, was. She stopped breathing. She had seen the images. She had thought she was prepared, but nothing could prepare a person for the reality of a war dragon. He was so large that her mind struggled to accept what her eyes were seeing. His scales were dark red, almost black, covered in those terrible scars she had noticed in the photograph. His eyes, each one bigger than her whole body, burned with ancient fire. The air around him felt heavy, electric, dangerous. And he was watching her. The moment she stepped through the door, his gaze found her and did not look away. Felt fear unlike anything she had ever known. Every part of her body screamed at her to run. This creature could kill her with a single breath. He had killed soldiers far stronger than her. He hated everything that walked on two legs. But she did not run. Instead, she looked at his scars. She looked at the way he held his body, always protecting his left side. She looked at how he flinched just slightly when a maintenance robot moved in the corner of the hangar. "Oh, he is afraid," she said. They blinked. "What?" "Oh, the dragon. He is afraid." His voice was barely a whisper. "He attacks because he is scared. He thinks everyone wants to hurt him. He is a weapon of mass destruction," said carefully. "He has killed 23 trained soldiers. Wounded animals killed too," replied. "It does not mean they are evil. It means they are in pain." She looked around the hangar and found a spot far from the dragon, near the entrance. Without asking permission, she walked to that spot and sat down on the cold metal floor. She took a book from her bag, a simple paper book, the kind that humans still made on Earth, and began to read. Growled. The sound was so deep that felt it in her bones. But she did not look up. She did not react at all. She simply turned a page and kept reading. It watched in confusion. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," said. "That is the point." She came back the next day and did the same thing, and the next day, and the next. She sat in her corner, read her book, ate her meals, and spoke softly to herself about small things, the weather on Earth, the flowers in her grandmother's garden, the old dog she had rescued last spring. She never looked directly at. She never approached him. She never asked anything of him. The warriors continued to mock her. Commander Sun grew impatient and demanded results. Coalition officials questioned whether this strange experiment was worth continuing, but noticed something on the fifth day. When entered the hangar, did not growl. His eyes still watched her, but the burning hatred in them had cooled just slightly. He seemed almost curious. "She is doing something none of us understood," reported to Sun that evening. Every warrior who entered that hangar wanted something from the dragon. They wanted to climb him, control him, use him. He could sense their intentions, and he rejected them. "And her?" Sun asked. "She wants nothing. She asks for nothing. She simply exists in his space day after day, letting him watch her without threat." Paused. "She is letting him choose." Sun frowned. The idea made no sense to his military mind. You did not wait for a weapon to choose you. You mastered it through skill and strength. But weeks passed, and slowly, so slowly that most people did not notice, the distance between and began to shrink. Not because she moved toward him, but because he began to move toward her. Centimeters at a time, like a frightened animal testing whether a hand would strike or stroke. And every day, simply sat and read her book, her soft voice filling the hangar with stories of earth and kindness and small beautiful things. The warriors laughed when they saw her, stood in the briefing room, surrounded by soldiers twice her size, and listened to their whispers. They spoke in languages she did not understand, but their meaning was clear from their faces. This small human girl, this was the coalition's new hope. "Lieutenant," the human military officer assigned to guide her, looked embarrassed. He was a tall man with a serious face and the body of someone who had spent his life in combat. Standing next to, he seemed like a completely different species. "I apologize for them," he said quietly. "They do not mean to be cruel. They simply do not understand why you are here." "I do not understand either," admitted. Her voice was soft as always. "I heal sick animals. I am not a warrior." "That is exactly why the xenobiology department requested you," said. "72 warriors have failed. Perhaps what needs is not another fighter." He led her through the station's long corridors. The walls were metal and cold. The lights hummed with a sound that made uncomfortable. Everything here was hard and sharp, built for war rather than comfort. She missed the wooden floors of her shelter, the smell of the sea through open windows. Finally, they reached a massive door marked with warning symbols in a dozen languages. Pressed his hand to a scanner, and the door slid open. The hangar beyond was the largest space had ever seen. It could have held her entire town inside it. And in the center, curled like a mountain of scales and fury, was. She stopped breathing. She had seen the images. She had thought she was prepared. But nothing could prepare a person for the reality of a war dragon. He was so large that her mind struggled to accept what her eyes were seeing. His scales were dark red, almost black, covered in those terrible scars she had noticed in the photograph. His eyes, each one bigger than her whole body, burned with ancient fire. The air around him felt heavy, electric, dangerous. And he was watching her. The moment she stepped through the door, his gaze found her and did not look away. Felt fear unlike anything she had ever known. Every part of her body screamed at her to run. This creature could kill her with a single breath. He had killed soldiers far stronger than her. He hated everything that walked on two legs. But she did not run. Instead, she looked at his scars. She looked at the way he held his body, always protecting his left side. She looked at how he flinched just slightly when a maintenance robot moved in the corner of the hangar. "Oh, he is afraid," she said. They blinked. "What?" "Oh, the dragon. He is afraid." His voice was barely a whisper. "He attacks because he is scared. He thinks everyone wants to hurt him. He is a weapon of mass destruction," said carefully. "He has killed 23 trained soldiers. Wounded animals killed too," replied. "It does not mean they are evil. It means they are in pain." She looked around the hangar and found a spot far from the dragon near the entrance. Without asking permission, she walked to that spot and sat down on the cold metal floor. She took a book from her bag, a simple paper book, the kind that humans still made on Earth, and began to read. Growled. The sound was so deep that felt it in her bones. But she did not look up. She did not react at all. She simply turned a page and kept reading. It watched in confusion. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," said. "That is the point." She came back the next day and did the same thing, and the next day, and the next. She sat in her corner, read her book, ate her meals, and spoke softly to herself about small things, the weather on Earth, the flowers in her grandmother's garden, the old dog she had rescued last spring. She never looked directly at. She never approached him. She never asked anything of him. The warriors continued to mock her. Commander Sun grew impatient and demanded results. Coalition officials questioned whether this strange experiment was worth continuing, but noticed something on the 5th day. When entered the hangar, did not growl. His eyes still watched her, but the burning hatred in them had cooled just slightly. He seemed almost curious. "She is doing something none of us understood," reported to Sun that evening. "Every warrior who entered that hangar wanted something from the dragon. They wanted to climb him, control him, use him. He could sense their intentions, and he rejected them." "And her?" Sun asked. "She wants nothing. She asks for nothing. She simply exists in his space day after day, letting him watch her without threat." Paused. "She is letting him choose." Sun frowned. The idea made no sense to his military mind. You did not wait for a weapon to choose you. You mastered it through skill and strength. But weeks passed, and slowly, so slowly that most people did not notice, the distance between and began to shrink. Not because she moved toward him, but because he began to move toward her, centimeters at a time, like a frightened animal testing whether a hand would strike or stroke. And every day simply sat and read her book, her soft voice filling the hangar with stories of earth and kindness and small beautiful things. 2 months had passed since arrived at the station. The coalition officials were losing patience. Every week, they sent angry messages demanding progress. Every week, defended the small human girl who sat in a hangar and did nothing. But it was not nothing. Had learned to see what was building. Trust could not be rushed. It grew like a plant, slowly, invisibly, until one day you looked and saw flowers where there had been only dirt. No longer stayed in his corner. He had moved closer to over the weeks, never approaching directly, but positioning himself so he could see her better. Sometimes, when she read aloud from her books, his eyes would half close, and the tension in his massive body would ease just a little. He still did not let her touch him. He still growled if anyone else entered the hangar. But with there was something different, something like the beginning of peace. One afternoon, noticed something that changed everything. She was watching move. He paced sometimes when he was restless, his huge body circling the hangar like a storm trapped in a bottle. But today his movements were wrong. He favored his left side too much. He paused too often, his breath catching in ways that did not seem normal. Stood up slowly. She said into her communication device, "I need the medical scans of all of them." An hour later, she sat in the station's medical bay, looking at images of the dragon's internal structure. The doctors had scanned him many times over the years, but they had focused on his weapons systems, his flight capabilities, his combat readiness. No one had paid much attention to the small shadow near his heart. "What is that?" asked, pointing at the image. The chief medical officer, an alien with 4 arms and skin like blue stone, leaned closer to look. "A fragment," he said. "Probably debris from his old control spike array. It broke off during battle 30 years ago. Is it causing him pain?" The doctor was silent for a moment. "Possibly. It is very close to his primary nerve cluster. We discussed removal once, but the surgery would be too dangerous. The fragment is embedded in tissue we cannot reach without risking his life." Stared at the image. A small piece of metal, jagged and cruel, sitting near heart for 3 decades. Every beat of his heart would press against it. Every breath would shift it slightly against his nerves. Constant, endless pain that no one could see and no one had tried to fix. She thought about the dogs she had treated on Earth. The ones with old injuries that made them bite when you touched certain places. The ones whose pain had been ignored for so long that they trusted no one. "I want to try," she said. The doctor's 4 arms crossed in a gesture of denial. "Impossible. You are not a surgeon, and even our best surgeons refused the operation." "Your surgeons cannot get close to him," said quietly. "I can." She returned to the hangar that evening with a request. Surgical tools. A plasma torch small enough for delicate work. Medical supplies designed for biology. Commander Sun came personally to tell her she was insane. "You are asking to perform surgery on a creature that has killed 23 soldiers," he said. "Without training, without experience. If he moves even slightly while you are working, you will die." "Yes," agreed. "I know." "Then why?" Looked through the observation window at. The dragon was watching her, as he always did now. His burning eyes held something they had not held before, a question. A hope so fragile that it hurt to see. "Because no one else will help him," she said. "Because he has been in pain for 30 years and everyone decided it was too hard to fix. Because the only way he will ever trust again is if someone takes a risk for him." She paused. "That is what healing means. It is not safe. It is not easy. but someone has to try. Sun was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slowly and walked away. The next morning entered the hangar carrying her tools. She did not sit in her usual corner. Instead, she walked toward slowly, openly, making no attempt to hide what she held. The dragon's growl shook the floor. Warning, threat, fear. Stopped. She was close enough now to see the details of his scars, the texture of his scales, the ancient grief in his eyes. "I know what they did to you," she said softly. "I know why you fight. The one who rode you before he hurt you. He put metal in your flesh and used pain to control you. And when he died, you decided that no one would ever hurt you again." As growl faded, he was listening. "But there is still something inside you," continued. "A piece of what he did. It is hurting you every day, every moment. You cannot heal while it remains." She held up her tools. "I want to take it out. It will be frightening. It might hurt, but I will be as gentle as I can. And when it is over, you will be free." She stood there, small and fragile, offering herself to a creature that could destroy her in an instant. Looked at her for a very long time. Then, slowly, like a mountain choosing to bow, he lowered his massive head to the ground and turned his body to expose the flesh over his heart. Let out a breath she did not know she was holding. Then she walked forward and began to heal him. The surgery took 11 hours. Worked without rest, her small hands steady despite the fear that lived in her heart. The medical team watched through cameras, ready to rush in if something went wrong, though everyone knew that if decided to kill her, no rescue would arrive in time. But the dragon did not move. He lay perfectly still, his burning eyes fixed on face as she cut through tissue and carefully moved aside structures that had never been meant for human hands to touch. His breath came slow and measured. His massive body, capable of destroying starships, remained gentle as a sleeping child. He trusted her. After 30 years of pain and rage, after rejecting every warrior the galaxy sent to him, he had chosen to trust this small, quiet human girl, and she honored that trust with every careful movement of her tools. The fragment was worse than the scans had shown. It was not just metal, it was corroded, poisoned by decades of contact with living tissue. Dark veins spread from it like roots of an evil plant. Removing it required patience that most surgeons would not have had. One wrong cut, one moment of rushing and would die. Did not rush. She worked the way she had always worked with wounded animals, gently, steadily, speaking soft words that meant nothing but carried everything. Almost there, she whispered. I know it hurts. I know you are scared, but you are so brave. You are the bravest creature I have ever met, just a little more, just a little longer. Finally, after 11 hours, she pulled the fragment free. It was an ugly thing. A jagged piece of metal the size of her fist, black with old blood and corruption. The remains of a control spike, the tool of a cruel master who had used pain instead of partnership. For 30 years, this piece of cruelty had lived inside's chest, poisoning him, reminding him with every heartbeat of the one who had hurt him. Dropped it on the hangar floor. She would have it destroyed later. For now, she had more important things to do. She cleaned the wound, applied healing compounds designed for dragon biology, and sealed the tissue with her plasma torch set to its lowest, gentlest setting. When she finished, she was exhausted. Her hands shook, her vision blurred. She had been awake for nearly 20 hours, but she did not leave. She sat down next to his massive head and placed her small hand against his scales. They were warm, rougher than she expected, marked by so many old scars. She could feel his heartbeat through them, steady now, no longer interrupted by the pain of foreign metal. It is done, she said softly. It is out. You are free. Made a sound. It was not a growl or a roar. It was something had never heard before, something the coalition's scientists would later say had never been recorded in all the history of war dragons. A keening, mournful cry that rose and fell like ocean waves, like wind through mountain passes, like a voice that had been silent for 30 years finally finding words for its grief. He was mourning for his dead rider. Yes, even the cruel one, because that was the nature of the bond. For the years of pain, for the loneliness, for everything he had lost and everything he had become, stayed with him through the night. She did not speak. She simply kept her hand on his scales, letting him know that he was not alone. When his mourning cry finally faded, she was still there. When the station's lights shifted from night to day, she was still there. And when finally lifted his head and looked at her with eyes that no longer burned with hatred, she smiled. Hello, she said. It is nice to finally meet you. The dragon's response was not words. War dragons did not speak in ways humans could hear. But it was understanding. It was acceptance. It was the beginning of something that had not existed for 3 decades. Stood to leave, planning to finally get some sleep, but moved, his massive body shifting to block her path. Not with aggression. There was no threat in his posture. Instead, he lowered his head again and made a soft sound, almost like a question. Then he tilted his body, exposing the place on his back where a rider would sit. An invitation. His heart stopped. She understood what this meant. A war dragon chose their rider for life. It was not a small thing, not a temporary arrangement. It was a bond that went beyond flesh and blood, beyond time and space. Once formed, it could never be broken. She thought about her quiet life on Earth, her small shelter, her gentle routines. She thought about what it would mean to be bonded to a creature of war, to carry the weight of a galaxy's hopes on her shoulders. Then she thought about his scars, his pain, his 30 years of loneliness. She thought about how far he had come, how much courage it had taken for him to trust again. How could she refuse him now? Slowly, carefully, climbed onto the war dragon's back. His scales were warm beneath her. His heartbeat drummed through her body like distant thunder. And when the bond formed, a sudden rush of connection, of shared thoughts and feelings, She understood for the first time what had been seeking all along. Not a master, not a controller, a partner, a friend. Someone who would never, ever hurt him. Commander Sun received the news an hour later. He stood in the observation room, watching through the window as the small human girl sat atop the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. How, he whispered, stood beside him, a rare smile on his serious face. Every warrior who came here saw a beast to be conquered, he said. She saw a creature in pain. That is the difference. That is what makes humans special. Sun shook his head slowly, unable to fully believe what he was seeing. In the hangar, leaned forward and wrapped her arms as far as they would go around his neck. It was a tiny gesture. Her arms could not even reach a fraction of the way around. But the dragon rumbled with something that sounded almost like contentment. For the first time in 30 years, he was not alone. The Hollow Empire came 3 weeks after the bonding. 7 fortress ships, each one the size of a moon, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Coalition territory. Their weapons charged with the cold light of destruction. Their message was simple: surrender or die. The Coalition fleet gathered to meet them. Thousands of ships, the combined might of 12 species, formed a wall between the Empire and the innocent worlds behind them. But everyone knew it was not enough. The fortress ships had already destroyed 3 colonies. Regular weapons could not break through their shields. Only a war dragon could do what needed to be done. Stood in the launch bay looking up at. The dragon had been transformed in the weeks since his surgery. His scales seemed brighter, his movements stronger. The constant pain that had haunted him for 30 years was gone, and in its place was something like joy, a fierce, burning happiness that felt through their bond whenever they were together. But now that joy was mixed with something else: determination, protectiveness, the will to fight. You do not have to do this, said. He had come to see her off, his face tight with worry. You are not a soldier. You never trained for combat. We can find another way. She shook her head. There is no other way. The fortress ships will reach the colony worlds in 6 hours. Millions of people will die. She looked up at. We are the only ones who can stop them. You could die. Yes, smiled sadly. But some things are worth the risk. That is what I told Commander Sun when I asked to help. I still believe it. She climbed onto the dragon's back, settling into the place that now felt like home. Through their bond, she felt emotions. His eagerness to fly again, his desire to protect, his love for the small human who had freed him from his pain. I do not know how to fight a war, she said to him silently, through the connection they shared. His response came as feelings rather than words. Warmth, reassurance, a sense of partnership that went beyond anything language could express. Then we will not fight a war, his mind seemed to say. We will end one, together. The launch bay doors opened, revealing the stars. Spread his wings. 600 meters of organic metal and ancient power, and leaped into the void. Flying on a war dragon was like nothing had ever experienced. The speed was impossible, the freedom absolute. Stars streamed past them like rain. The cold of space could not touch them. His body generated its own heat, its own atmosphere, protecting his rider from the vacuum. Ahead, the battle had already begun. Coalition ships exchanged fire with the fortress fleet, their weapons leaving trails of light against the darkness. But the fortress ships barely seemed to notice. Their shields absorbed everything. Their return fire tore through the coalition lines like a knife through paper. Then arrived, and everything changed. The Hollow Empire knew about war dragons. They had fought against them in the old wars. They knew how dangerous these creatures could be, living weapons of mass destruction, capable of breaking through any defense. When they saw approaching, they turned all 7 fortress ships toward him and opened fire. Plasma beams, missile swarms, energy weapons that could melt asteroids. Everything the Empire had they threw at the dragon. Felt fear spike through her body. but through the bond sent her calm. He had been hit by these weapons before. They had him, yes, but they had not killed him. And now, free of pain, bonded with a rider who loved him, he was stronger than he had ever been. He danced between the beams. He twisted away from the missiles. He moved through the storm of destruction like water through rocks, finding paths that should not have existed, dodging attacks that should have been impossible to dodge. And realized something. She was not commanding him. She was not controlling him the way the old writers had. Instead, they were thinking together, feeling together, moving as one creature with two minds. Her instincts, trained by years of working with animals, combined with his ancient battle knowledge. Her compassion guided his power. His strength protected her fragility. And together they were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. They reached the first fortress ship and found its weakness immediately. Not through tactical analysis, but through intuition. The same instinct that let know when an animal was ready to trust her. The shields had a gap, just for a moment when the weapons recycled. Struck in that moment, his claws tearing through the hull. But he did not destroy, would not let him destroy. Instead, they targeted the engines, the weapons systems, the things that made the fortress ship dangerous. They left the life support running. They left paths for the crew to escape. When the ship fell silent, disabled but not dead, thousands of enemy soldiers reached their escape pods and fled. Why? Asked through their bond, confused by her restraint. Because killing should be the last choice, answered. Not the first. We are not here to make war. We are here to end it. They moved to the next ship, and the next, and the next. Each time guided to strike with precision instead of fury, to disable instead of destroy. It was harder than simply killing everything. It took more time, more effort, more risk. But with each ship that fell silent, with each crew that escaped alive, felt something change in the battle. The Empire soldiers had expected death. They had expected a monster. Instead, they found mercy. And mercy knew was more powerful than any weapon. When the last fortress ship surrendered, its commander broadcasting acceptance of defeat, the coalition fleet watched in stunned silence. The battle that should have cost millions of lives had ended with minimal casualties on both sides. Floated in space among the disabled ships, his body marked with new scars from the weapons that had struck him. But through their bond felt his pride, his satisfaction, his love for the human girl who had shown him a different way to fight. Thank you," she said silently. No," responded, his thoughts warm around her mind. Thank you for teaching me that strength is not the same as cruelty, for showing me what I could become. They returned to Coalition Station Meridian as heroes, but did not stay for the celebrations. She did not want medals or speeches or fame. She just wanted to go home. A month later, she was back on Earth in her small coastal town at her quiet shelter. The ocean waves rolled against the shore just as they always had. The seals barked on the rocks. The dogs in her care wagged their tails when she brought their food. And in the deep water just offshore, a mountain of scales and ancient power rested, his eyes always watching the small building where his rider lived. Had followed her home. He would always follow her home. The galaxy remembered them. The quiet human girl and her war dragon, who had ended a war through compassion instead of conquest. Military historians studied their battle for years, trying to understand how they had done what seemed impossible. But those who truly understood did not need to study. They simply watched sit on the beach each evening, speaking softly to the massive creature in the water, and they knew. The fiercest beings do not yield to strength. They yield to those who are patient enough to see their pain, gentle enough to touch their wounds, and brave enough to love them despite the scars. Had done all of that, and in doing so she had changed everything. Far across the galaxy, the coalition quietly changed its methods. When they found traumatized creatures, broken soldiers, beings that attacked everyone who came near, they no longer sent warriors to force obedience. They sent the quiet ones, the healers, the ones who knew that the deepest wounds could not be fixed with weapons. Well, they sent humans. And slowly, one gentle touch at a time, the galaxy began to heal.